We need to discuss immediate restructuring, Courtney declared, her voice cutting through the air like ice. I stood in her pristine office doorway, a space so minimalist and cold it felt less like an office and more like a high-end surgical suite. I watched as she didn't even lift her eyes from her laptop screen, her fingers tapping away at the keyboard with a relentless, mechanical rhythm. The sound was the only thing that filled the suffocating silence. 5 days. 5 days until my retirement party, the one the whole team had been planning for months. 35 years. 35 years at Brackenridge Logistics, and this is how it would end. Not with a handshake, not with a slice of cake, but with a summons from a woman half my age who had been with the company for a mere 3 months. My name is Cynthia Ward, and at 64 years old, I thought I'd seen everything this company could throw at me. I was wrong. I started here in 1990, a part-time inventory clerk in Salt Lake City, working evenings while my kids were small. I needed the work, and Brackenridge, back then, felt like a haven. It was a family business, run by the kind, white-haired Mr. Brackenridge himself. The warehouse was half the size it is now, a little dusty and filled with the scent of cardboard and diesel, but it was ours. Old Mr. Brackenridge would walk the floors every single morning, a thermos of coffee in one hand, greeting each employee by name. He knew my kids' names, asked about my husband's health, and always remembered that I was taking night classes to finish my degree. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, a sepia-toned memory from a different world, as I stared at this woman who couldn't even be bothered to make eye contact. She was the personification of the new Brackenridge Logistics. The company had been sold twice since Mr. Brackenridge retired. The first time, in 2003, was to a larger regional firm. They promised to maintain the company culture, but the family feel began to erode, replaced by memos and metrics. The second sale, in 2018, was to a massive, soulless multinational conglomerate. That's when the real changes began. The old-timers were phased out, replaced by young, ambitious graduates with impressive degrees and zero loyalty. And then, 3 months ago, came Courtney. She was 32, fresh from some prestigious corporate consulting firm in New York, armed with an MBA and a vocabulary composed almost entirely of buzzwords. Synergy, optimization, leveraging assets. Since her arrival, she had been systematically evaluating efficiency, her presence casting a cold shadow over the entire operations department. I'd watched her dismiss veteran employees, people who had poured decades of their lives into this place, with the same emotional detachment she might use to delete a spam email. "Please, sit down," Courtney continued, finally glancing up. Her eyes were a cold, flat gray, the kind that had intimidated so many of my colleagues over the past few weeks. They held no warmth, no curiosity, only a dispassionate, analytical glint. I'd seen that look on the faces of corporate raiders in movies, never expecting to see it directed at me from across a sterile, white desk. I settled into the uncomfortable chair, a piece of modern art that was clearly designed for aesthetics, not comfort. It was hard and angular, forcing me into a rigid, formal posture. I folded my hands in my lap, my knuckles white. After 3.5 decades of navigating corporate politics, I knew when a conversation was heading somewhere dark. The signs were all there, the closed door, her rigid posture, the way she shuffled what looked like termination paperwork on her desk without truly seeing it. "Cynthia, I'll be direct," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. She prided herself on her directness, confusing bluntness with efficiency. "As part of our ongoing strategic realignment, we've decided the department needs a complete overhaul. And that means starting fresh with new leadership. Your position as head of operations is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical punch to the stomach. A wave of nausea washed over me, and for a terrifying second, the room tilted. Eliminated. Not retired, not transitioning. Eliminated. Like a line item on a spreadsheet, a bug in the system. I thought of the retirement party scheduled for Friday afternoon. I thought about the colleagues who had spent weeks organizing speeches and ordering my favorite chocolate cake from the bakery downtown. I thought about the beautiful watch they'd all pooled their money to buy, a timepiece. Scott had shown me a picture of incompetence, his eyes shining with pride. It was still wrapped and sitting in his desk drawer. But I kept my expression neutral. 35 years of experience had taught me many things, but the most important was to never show weakness in moments like these. "I see," I said simply, my voice a marvel of steadiness despite the betrayal burning a hole in my chest. Courtney seemed surprised by my calm response. A flicker of something, annoyance? Confusion, crossed her features before being replaced by her usual placid mask. Perhaps she'd expected tears or arguments. Perhaps she'd been hoping for it, a little drama to break the monotony of her day. "Human resources will handle your transition," she said, already turning her attention back to her laptop. "We appreciate your years of service, of course." Years of service. The phrase was a dagger. As if 35 years of dedication, of staying late when shipments ran behind, of coming in on weekends during blizzards, of training countless employees who'd gone on to successful careers, could be summarized in such a dismissive, generic phrase. Something cold and hard settled in my chest as I realized this wasn't just about me. I'd built my life around this place. I watched it evolve from a small family business into the regional powerhouse it had become. When Mr. Brackenridge sold to the first corporate buyer in 2003, I stayed. When they sold again in 2010 and again in 2018, I remained the constant thread, holding the operations together. Each new ownership brought promises of respecting company culture and valuing experienced employees, but I'd learned to judge them by their actions, not their words. My rise through the ranks hadn't been easy. Starting as a part-time clerk meant proving myself twice as hard as the full-time hires. I'd earned my operations role by staying late, learning every system, and becoming the person everyone turned to when problems arose. Over the years, I'd trained dozens of employees, many of whom still called me for advice even after moving to other companies. Scott Henderson had been one of my first major successes. He'd started as an intern 7 years ago, unsure and overwhelmed by the complexity of logistics planning. I'd taken him under my wing, teaching him how to read shipping patterns, manage vendor relationships, and think 3 steps ahead of potential problems. Now, as our lead planner, he handled some of our biggest accounts with a confidence I'd helped nurture. Meena Patel had been another project close to my heart. She'd joined our payroll department 12 years ago as a recent college graduate, intimidated by the veteran staff who'd been there since the company's early days. I'd encouraged her through her first major audit, supported her when she proposed switching to new software, and celebrated when she was promoted to lead payroll coordinator. She'd become like a daughter to me, often staying after work to chat about her family and seek advice about her career. Then there was Jackson Torres, our warehouse supervisor, who'd started as a temporary holiday worker and impressed everyone with his work ethic. I'd recommended him for permanent hire and later supported his promotion when the previous supervisor retired. These weren't just employees to me. They were people I'd invested in, relationships I'd nurtured, professionals I'd helped shape. The thought of leaving them under Courtney's cold, clinical management style made my heart ache. I'd seen how she treated people, like replaceable assets, rather than human beings with families, dreams, and decades of accumulated knowledge. As I sat in that sterile office, listening to Courtney explain the transition process, I realized she had no idea what she was about to lose. She saw my termination as a simple cost-cutting measure, a way to bring in cheaper, younger leadership. What she couldn't comprehend was the intricate web of relationships, institutional knowledge, and team loyalty that would walk out the door with me. But perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen for her to understand the true cost of her decision. "The team will be informed this afternoon," Courtney continued, her fingers dancing across her keyboard as if my termination was just another task to check off her daily list. "We'll be posting the head of operations position externally, looking for fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to departmental management." Fresh perspectives. The phrase made my jaw clench. As if 35 years of successfully managing operations, maintaining client relationships, and building a cohesive team meant nothing compared to whatever buzzword-filled approach she planned to implement. I thought about the countless crises I'd navigated, the blizzard of 2011 when I'd coordinated emergency deliveries from my home, the computer system crash of 2016 that I'd helped resolve by manually tracking hundreds of shipments, the supply chain disruptions during the pandemic, when my long-standing relationships with vendors had kept us operational while competitors struggled. All of it dismissed as outdated. Simply because it came from someone she viewed as expendable. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 64 years in my lower back, but refusing to let it show. I understand. Should I collect my personal items now? For the first time during our conversation, Courtney looked genuinely uncomfortable. Human resources will coordinate that. We prefer to handle transitions discreetly to minimize disruption. Minimize disruption. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was about to create the biggest disruption this department had seen in decades, but she was worried about the optics of an employee packing a box. I nodded once, professionally, and turned toward the door. Cynthia, she called as I reached for the handle. This isn't personal. It's just business. I paused, my hand on the cold metal, and turned back to face her, a small, tight smile on my lips. For 35 years, I'd bitten my tongue in moments like these, swallowed my pride, and maintained my professionalism, even when it cost me personally. But something about this moment, perhaps the finality of it, or maybe the sheer callousness of her dismissal, loosened something inside me. You're absolutely right, Courtney, I said, my voice steady and calm. It isn't personal. You don't know me well enough for it to be personal. You don't know any of us well enough. Her eyebrows raised slightly, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I walked out of her office, through the main floor where my team was busy with afternoon tasks, and straight to human resources. As I passed Scott's desk, he looked up with a concerned expression, clearly reading something in my face that I couldn't quite hide. I gave him a small, sad smile and kept walking, already knowing that this wouldn't end the way Courtney expected. The human resources meeting was a blur of paperwork and corporate speak. Janet Mills, who had been with the company almost as long as I had, looked genuinely pained as she walked me through the termination process. Her hand shook slightly as she slid the final documents across the conference table. Cynthia, I want you to know this directive came from above, she whispered, glancing toward the closed door. I fought against it, we all did. But Courtney has complete authority over operations restructuring. I signed the papers mechanically, my mind already moving beyond this sterile room to the real consequences of what was happening. I know, Janet. You've always been fair to everyone here. Your benefits package includes the full retirement compensation we discussed last month, she continued, her voice gaining strength. That hasn't changed. And if you need a reference for anything. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Janet was good people, caught in an impossible situation. How are you planning to handle the announcement? Her face darkened. Courtney wants to address the operations team at 4 p.m. She's calling it a strategic realignment meeting. Strategic realignment. More corporate euphemisms to mask the human cost of her decisions. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 3:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, she'd be telling my team that their leader of 7 years was gone, effective immediately. No transition, no explanation beyond budget constraints, no acknowledgement of what we'd built together. Will the team have a chance to ask questions? I asked, though Janet's expression told me everything I needed to know. She wants to keep it brief and professional. I nodded and stood, extending my hand to shake hers. Take care of yourself, Janet. And take care of them as much as you can. As I walked toward the exit, I passed the operations floor one last time. Scott was at his desk, deep in conversation with Mina about a client delivery schedule. Jackson was coordinating with the warehouse team about tomorrow's incoming shipments. Elena was on the phone with a customer, using the patient tone I'd coached her to adopt with difficult accounts. They had no idea their world was about to change. I thought about stopping, about giving them some kind of warning. But that would only make things harder for everyone. Better to let Courtney deliver her news and deal with the consequences herself. Still, as I pushed through the front doors into the crisp October air, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had no idea what she'd just set in motion. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from my daughter. So excited for Friday. Did you remind everyone about Mom's favorite flowers for the decorations? Tulip. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, change of plans. I'll call you tonight. The drive home felt surreal. After 35 years of leaving this parking lot knowing I'd be back tomorrow, this time felt different. Final. I'd always imagined my last day would involve handshakes and hugs, maybe a few tears, and definitely that chocolate cake Scott had been secretly planning. Instead, I was driving away with a box of personal items I hadn't even been allowed to pack myself. But as I pulled into my driveway, something unexpected settled over me. Not sadness or anger, those would come later, but a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time in decades, I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. My phone rang as I was unlocking my front door. The caller ID showed Scott's name. Cynthia, his voice was tight with emotion. What the hell just happened? I set my box down on the kitchen counter and took a deep breath before answering. She terminated my position, Scott. Effective immediately. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely controlled. 5 days before your retirement party? 5 days? I know this is insane. You've carried this department for years. Half our clients ask for you specifically. Our efficiency ratings are the highest they've been since. He stopped himself, probably realizing that logic had nothing to do with Courtney's decision. How did the team take the news? I asked, though I could already guess from the pain in his voice. She hasn't told us yet. The meeting's in 20 minutes. But Janet let it slip to Mina, and word spreading fast. His voice dropped to a whisper. People are furious, Cynthia. I've never seen anything like it. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. My team was tight-knit, forged by years of working together through challenges and celebrating successes. They'd planned this retirement party not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Many of them considered me a mentor, a friend, sometimes even a mother figure. Scott, I need you to listen to me carefully, I said, settling into my kitchen chair. A cold resolve was beginning to form, chasing away the shock. Whatever happens in that meeting, don't do anything rash. Don't let emotion override your judgment. Don't do anything rash, his voice rose. Cynthia, they just threw away 35 years of your life like it meant nothing. How are we supposed to just sit there and take that? Because you have families to support, careers to protect, and futures to consider, I replied firmly. Don't let my situation jeopardize yours. But even as I said the words, I knew they wouldn't listen. These weren't just employees following corporate directives. They were people who understood loyalty, who valued relationships over profit margins. And Courtney was about to discover what happened when you underestimated those bonds. A new thought, sharp and clear, cut through the fog of my emotions. Courtney saw this as a business decision. Well, she was about to learn a very hard lesson about business. I had spent 35 years building this company's operational success, one relationship at a time. I knew every client, every vendor, every process, every potential point of failure. Courtney thought she was cutting a line item. She was actually cutting the company's lifeline. And I was about to hand her the scissors. Scott, I said, my voice changing, the hint of anticipation now a current of steel. Actually, I have a different idea. Forget what I just said. Do what you feel is right. And tell the others to do the same. What are you thinking, Cynthia? I'm thinking that sometimes, the best way to handle a fire is to let it burn. Let Courtney see what happens when the people who actually run this company decide they've had enough. Before he could respond, I added, and Scott? That beautiful watch? I want it. Have someone drop it by my house this evening. I smiled, a real smile this time. It's time I started enjoying my retirement. I hung up and took a slow sip of the coffee I'd just brewed. The first message came just as the clock struck 4 p.m., right when Courtney's strategic realignment meeting was supposed to begin. It was from Mina. I'm out. So is the entire payroll team. Then, a text from Jackson. The warehouse is officially closed for business. We won't forget what you've done for us, Cynthia. Then Elena. Thank you for everything you taught me. I quit. One by one, messages poured in from colleagues, support staff, even people from other departments who'd heard the news. Each one was a small validation that my 35 years had mattered, that the relationships I'd built were real and lasting. But it was the silence that followed that told me the most. No angry texts, no heated phone calls, no dramatic pronouncements. Just quiet. And I knew from experience that quiet was often more dangerous than noise. At 4:47 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Janet from Human Resources, and her voice was strained. Cynthia, we have a situation. I need to ask, did you say anything to the operations team about your termination? No, I replied honestly. I followed protocol completely. Because we have 23 resignation letters on my desk right now, and people are still coming. I felt a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. How many is still coming, Janet? Her answer made my coffee cup pause halfway to my lips. 12 more since I called you. That's 35 people. The entire operations department, half the warehouse staff, and all of payroll. Cynthia, I've been in human resources for 18 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The phone rang on her other line. I have to go, she said, her voice a mix of panic and awe. This isn't over. The next morning, I woke up not to an alarm, but to the sun streaming through my window. I made a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the backyard where fall leaves were beginning their annual dance to the ground. For the first time in decades, I had nowhere I needed to be. No deadlines to meet, no fires to put out. My phone buzzed with a text from Mina, this is wrong, so wrong. Then another from Jackson, we won't forget what you've done for us. One by one, messages of support and outrage filled my screen. The true scope of the chaos became clear when I received a call from Tom Bradley, the CEO of our largest and most important client. Cynthia, what in God's name is going on over there? He boomed, not even waiting for a hello. I called this morning about our Friday shipment, and some kid who didn't even know our account terms tried to charge me standard rates instead of our negotiated pricing. When I asked to speak to someone in charge, they put me on hold for 20 minutes and then transferred me to someone who'd never even heard of my company. I explained the situation as diplomatically as I could, omitting my own role in the exodus but painting a clear picture of the corporate restructuring. Tom's response was swift and decisive. Well, that settles it. We're moving our business. I can't risk my supply chain on a company run by incompetent bean counters. You know any good logistics companies looking for a reliable, multi-million-dollar client? I did, of course. After 35 years in the industry, I knew every reputable company in the region. By the end of that phone call, Tom had the contact information for 3 of Brackenridge's top competitors. And Tom wasn't the only one. Throughout the day, I fielded similar calls from other long-term clients, all expressing frustration with the sudden collapse of service. Each conversation ended the same way, with me providing a curated list of alternative providers, companies I knew were run by people who, like the old Mr. Brackenridge, valued relationships and understood that loyalty was a two-way street. By evening, word reached me through industry contacts that Brackenridge had lost 4 major accounts in a single day. The financial impact was already substantial, but the reputational damage would be even more costly in the long term. A week later, the fallout was biblical. News articles and business journals detailed the Brackenridge exodus, citing anonymous sources who spoke of a veteran employee's callous termination triggering a mass walkout. The company's stock plummeted. The board of directors, scrambling to stop the bleeding, announced an internal investigation. Courtney was unceremoniously fired. I sat in my quiet kitchen, sipping coffee and looking at the beautiful retirement watch, which my team had delivered to my doorstep that first chaotic evening. It was heavy and solid in my hand. My phone rang. It was Scott. "We did it, Cynthia," he said, his voice filled with a triumphant calm. "Tom Bradley just signed with us. He brought his entire account. Mina, Jackson, and I are rebuilding our team over here. They gave us everything we asked for." I smiled. "I never doubted you for a second, Scott." "You know," he said, "Courtney tried to blame you for all this. Said you orchestrated it." "And what did corporate say?" I asked. "They said, an effective leader can't be replaced by a memo." They knew. They saw the numbers, the client complaints, the stock price. They knew she made a fatal business decision. Looking back on that whirlwind of consequences, I understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. It's simply allowing people to experience the full weight of their own poor decisions. Courtney thought she was just doing business. But business is about people, about trust, about loyalty. She tried to erase 35 years of my life with a single, cold-hearted conversation. In doing so, she erased herself. My legacy wasn't a plaque on a wall or a mention in a corporate newsletter. It was the team I had built, the relationships I had fostered, and the loyalty that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. And that, I realized, was a victory far more satisfying than any retirement party could ever have been.